Yes, welcome in. Back here on the camp. Badgers offseason program kind of in the books with Squat Fest finishing up on Friday. The younger guys going to be sticking around for a little bit more, but the older guys off on at least a week or two away before OTAs start. And then obviously fall camp gets going here in about a month. So we're getting close, Jesse. But before we jump into that, did you have a good weekend?
I did, yeah. Saturday night waiting on a commitment announcement. That's one way to spend it. Another way is to go to Morgan Wallen at Camp Randall Stadium. You take your pick on which is more enjoyable.
So you did one of those things. I did the other. People can probably guess which is which. But, yeah, at least he committed to Wisconsin, right? Like, at least that happened, and you weren't wasting your time, even though we all knew that he was going to commit to Wisconsin anyways. But that said, yeah, Morgan Wallen at Camp Randall was pretty amazing on Saturday night. They had some weather issues on Sunday night, but he played for like 3 hours. So, like, they got their money's worth last night, even though they had to deal with a little bit of weather. But some jump around. I'm just going to say this right now. They need to start giving away those wristbands that they do for Morgan Wallen, like the light bands, and for like night games at Camp Randall, and do that for jump around. That was awesome. They should do that all the time. I know that like sometimes they do it with the phones. Like if you have the app and all that good stuff, they should do it with the wristbands. Those things were awesome. All right, but plenty to get to here as Wisconsin got a couple of big-time commitments. And we talked about Amari Latimer, or we mentioned him there. Also, Jayden Petit, the wide receiver. They're two composite four-star players. We'll get into that. Also talk about Jeff Grimes' offense. Jesse's story talking about what kind of impact it could have and why people are confident that Wisconsin will be back to some of the smash mouth stuff that they were known for so long that kind of went away the last couple of years. And also some odds and ends, largely coming from Squat Fest and some of the things that Brady Collins had to say about some guys making some big-time gains just since they arrived in January. But I think obviously where we probably need to start is with the two big recruiting wins that Wisconsin had since last time we did a show. Jayden Petit committed on Thursday, and then you got Amari Latimer coming in on Saturday, and they are obviously their two highest rated commits. And the Jayden Petit one obviously is one of the highest rated receivers Wisconsin's ever recruited. I mean, you go back and look at the composite rankings. Craig Appleton didn't go so great for him at Wisconsin or in life in general. And then you have Lance Kendricks, who obviously was a wide receiver in Milwaukee, but then made the move to tight end at Wisconsin. That one paid off quite well. But both those guys coming in, significant for Luke Fickell and his staff, because that class is not as highly rated as some of the other ones that they've had the past couple of years. Two huge ads for them.
This is big on a number of fronts. First of all, as you mentioned, before those guys publicly announced their commitments, Wisconsin was sitting at 13 committed players and didn't have any 24/7 sports composite four-star prospects. And yes, Wisconsin over the years, we know, has developed 2- and 3-star guys into great players. But I think you have to get these kinds of guys, one, to generate excitement among the fan base, but two, because they feel like they can be difference makers early on. And that is so important. Just go back to the 2024 class, for example, with a Darian Dupree and a Dylan Jones, 4-star players who this year, based on what we've seen, should be your 1-2 running back combination. And they're only in their second year in the program. So you need those types of players that can go anywhere. But let's start with the commitment of Jayden on Thursday night. This is a guy that that type of wide receiver, as you laid out, does not come along to a place like Wisconsin very often. He is 6'4", 200+ pounds. You look at the film, and he is a super physical athlete who can win downfield. He wins 50-50 balls. I mean, what DB who's 5'10" in high school is going to be able to compete with someone with that level of athleticism who's got 5 or 6 inches on him? He ended up with 50 catches for 777 yards and 12 touchdowns last season. And what's interesting is he actually just transferred to a different school down in Naples, Florida, and his head coach now is Chris Maragos, who's a familiar name to Badgers fans, was a safety here 15, 16 years ago. And I talked to Maragos about Jayden, and he said, obviously, he is quite familiar with this program. He says, I know about this program, and there's no disrespect to the wide receivers that they've had in the last 20+ years, but this guy can come in and be on a level that essentially, I'm paraphrasing, Wisconsin has not seen. And it's easy to speak in hyperbole right now that the guy still has another year of high school. He hasn't set foot on campus, but that is the level of excitement and level of talent that he provides. So that is so important because, yes, Wisconsin is going to get back to some of those smash mouth roots. But as Jayden told me, Jeff Grimes' offense, if he has playmakers, he's going to utilize them. And the other thing that's worth noting here, because we almost never talk about the academics and education, but that was a legitimate selling point here for Wisconsin because Jayden wants to go into commercial real estate. And as it happens, U.S. News and World Report ranked Wisconsin's undergraduate real estate program #1 in the country last fall. So that was another reason why he was intrigued by Wisconsin. But I think it says a lot about the staff to get a guy like this where they don't even offer him until January. He doesn't even visit until spring practices and then really starts to think about Wisconsin as a viable option and ultimately comes twice here on the first weekend of official visit season, comes back for an unofficial because Maragos brought a couple of players up for a team camp. So for Wisconsin to close on a guy whose other finalists were Oklahoma, North Carolina, and Missouri says a lot about what they were able to accomplish here in a short time frame.
Yeah, obviously you mentioned the one quote from Maragos, and that one stood out to me. And I actually had it in my notes. I was going to ask you about it. But the other one, obviously, is he says he's a Midwest kid who has Midwest mindset and values, but is in South Florida and has all the SEC offers and all that good stuff. So he's a guy that, and Maragos obviously knows the Midwest, as you said. He did play here and was a very good player for Wisconsin on some pretty good defenses. But that said, that one came in on Thursday. The Latimer one came in on Saturday, and you had a chance to talk to his dad, and the one I like, the quote that is in your article up on BadgerConnect.com. Make sure to go and sign up. $10 a month, $100 for the year. I personally feel that Amari is a little bit like James White in a Ron Dame type of combination. Sign me up. Sign me up for that combination.
Yeah. We knew this one was coming down the pipeline, and you want to give credit for all these wins. Devin Spalding deserves a lot for this one because Amari had 50-plus offers, and Wisconsin knew it was in a good position, which is why when you saw some of these top-level running backs that had official visits scheduled, Wisconsin ended up canceling them. Well, you don't do that unless you're darn certain you're getting the top guy on your board. But Jamal Rule was someone they were going to bring in. He ended up committing to Nebraska. Nelson Wheeler they were going to bring in. He commits to Illinois. They had Ryan Estrada scheduled to come in the second weekend, and he ended up committing to Minnesota. So all three guys are going to Big Ten rivals, and you're coming off a year where you didn't get any running back. You went after your top guy. You didn't get him. You didn't bring anyone through the transfer portal. You absolutely had to get your #1 guy on the board, and they nailed it with Amari Latimer. But to your point about the skill set, that's how his dad feels. He's got the power and he's got the scat type ability. Watch the first play of his huddle highlights from his junior season. I think it says everything. There are, I get it's sort of man among boys, but it's always fun to watch this stuff. There's a read option. They give him the ball around the right side of his line. The line just totally collapses up the middle. A linebacker comes in. There are two dudes draped all over him. He rips himself away from these two guys, and then he stiff arms a dude down the right sideline. He jukes a fourth guy and then outruns a fifth guy. And it's a 75-yard touchdown. But that is some of that ability. Like the next highlight, there's a linebacker that comes up and he knocks him backwards 5 yards and then outruns the entire defense. So that's the level of talent. We'll see ultimately whether it materializes at Wisconsin. But just having that opportunity, as his dad said, like, we don't want to – he told me about – they obviously studied this, but the short shelf life of a running back. We don't want to be waiting 2 and 3 years to play. We want to be productive right away so we can ultimately get to the NFL. And he said Jeff Grimes' offense will allow him to have NFL-type runs to demonstrate to the NFL so that by the time he gets to the combine, he will have checked all the boxes that are necessary. Obviously, that is sort of the best-case scenario, but when you are a 4-star top-level running back, that's how you are thinking as an individual and as a family.
Yeah, the one run that stood out, obviously the one that you mentioned off the top, and then the linebacker one was crazy. I don't know they knocked him back 5 yards. He knocked him into the ground. Like he just put his shoulder into him and the guy went down, and you see him take off and outrun everybody. You can see the linebacker. He's like on his knees and then he just puts his head down. Like that's not supposed to happen. I mean, it's got some impressive runs on that film. And again, we know how important it was for them to get a guy in this class, as you mentioned, because they did not get one in last year's class, did not take anybody out of the transfer portal. So this is a big one. And also it's a huge win against some of the better programs that are out there, right? I mean, some of the he had offers from over 50 schools. He was supposed to take a visit to Michigan. I know Michigan ended up taking another running back, but he had so many different options. And for Wisconsin to get him and know that he's the guy and the only guy is obviously huge for this staff. And they're not necessarily done. They've still got some other guys out there, but these two are the big ones.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is why it's so important to get guys here on the first weekend of official visits. It means you're serious about them, but they're serious about you. Both of these guys were first weekend official visitors, and both of them ended up coming back. The Latimer situation, his recruitment was interesting because the only other school he actually visited was Georgia Tech, and his dad said it was really a 1A and 1B type of situation. He was supposed to go to Michigan that second weekend. He ended up coming back to Wisconsin for an unofficial, and the story behind that is kind of strange, the way his dad put it. So we should mention his older brother, Jameer Latimer II, is on the team, transferred in January from Jacksonville State. So that played a role here. But they came to Madison to deliver his car to him. I guess he had got a car. It was supposed to come when he was back for spring break, and it came the day after Jameer left. And so they drove it up here. And that was part of why they ended up in Madison that second weekend. But for Wisconsin to get Amari here on the first weekend, and then however it ended up happening, get him back here the second weekend, really told you that the direction things were headed. And the one other thing about Jayden is we're talking about Amari where they were only going to take this one running back, but he was of such a high level at wide receiver that Wisconsin was fine filling up at wide receiver and then going and getting him anyway, because initially the plan was to take two wide receivers. They had Tayshaun Bardo earlier. He was a great recruiter for the rest of this class. But then it was, who's going to be number two? Zachary Washington also came on an official visit, ended up committing to Michigan State. So on the third weekend of official visits, they brought in Zion Legree from Florida, a very fast dude, ran like a 4.3 40, but he committed. But they were going to wait. And if they could get a Jayden Pettit, they were going to take three because he is that good of a player and a potential game changer at the position.
Yeah, significant weekend, significant couple days there, Thursday and Saturday for the Badgers to get those commitments and bolster a class that is now at 15.
Right, 15 total commitments. And I think the plan is if they can get somewhere in the neighborhood of 18, but obviously it's a smaller class than what they've had before.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about the offense that those guys could potentially play in here starting not this coming fall, but next fall when they would be arriving in Madison. And that is Jeff Grimes' offense and the differences that we are certainly going to notice, that we notice in spring ball, that fans will get to see certainly when the season gets going. I know the people that went to spring probably got to see it a little bit as well, but this is a different offense, and it has a lot of people excited, namely the offensive linemen and the offensive line coach and AJ Blazik. But there were so many different things out of this article that you put up at Badger Connect that stood out for me. But the one thing that truly, one of the quotes I should say that really stood out to me was from AJ Blazik. And you bring it all there. It's a little more of a street fight than it is a Kentucky Derby. So the big guys, they're always going to take the 5-yard sprint over the 50-yard sprint. I think they enjoy this style of play. Let's get in the phone booth, punch each other for a while, and see who comes out. And that's a huge part of this. There's another part of it, obviously, with the motions and the eye candy and making defenses respect everything, because different formations, or I should say the same formation, you can run 8 different plays out of it and make it all look the same. But to me, that is as Wisconsin as it gets right there.
Very much so. And let's not pretend like everybody wasn't expressing excitement when Phil Longo got here 2 years ago. But the way I think of it is there was excitement, but it was more curiosity than certainty that this was going to work. And there's no guarantee that Jeff Grimes' offense is going to work, but there is just a general feeling, I think, around these offensive players that this is a return to some of the roots of Wisconsin. This just makes more sense for what the Badgers are. And multiple guys said, I don't think Phil Longo was a bad coach. He's had success at other places, but there's something to be said for it wasn't the right fit here and it wasn't the right time here. And that certainly became apparent to all of us who were watching it. But now you're going back to some of that nitty-gritty style of football. And so the two things that I focused on for this story were, well, what is the scheme Jeff Grimes wants to run, and what are the things he's doing out of that scheme? Because all the motions stood out immediately. All the pre-snap motions, all the ways you can utilize guys with wide receivers getting the ball in the backfield. But then he's a proponent of this wide zone offense, which is it's a run heavy offensive scheme that focuses on horizontal displacement of like how the offensive line blocks to try to get out toward the edge, but it's not always about that. You're going to be between the tackle box. Ultimately, I think what it does is it puts more of the onus on the offensive line and the running backs, which is what Luke Fickell has said he's wanted since the start of last year. So the offensive line is going to block, and then the running back can read that block. And as Jake Renfro put it, the running back has what's called an anyway go. So if the O-line goes here, the running back can go there. There are a lot of technical details and intricacies, but ultimately it is about that so-called smash mouth football and not just going to a landmark and blocking like an area, but taking the fight to these people. And then you throw in all these motions where you're making the defense think a little bit more. And Joe Brunner put it really well. Like, these guys are thinking and moving, and the offensive line, meanwhile, is moving up the field. And now you're blocking at the second level, which is creating all these different angles for the offense. So it all sounds good now. We'll see what happens during the season. But I think we both agree that what we saw in the spring simply makes more sense for the types of players Wisconsin has and the way Wisconsin can be successful.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's also about being physical, right? And getting after it. Can you tell me the difference between a sheep and a sheepdog?
Yes, right. Dylan Jones had some good comments about it, but so Jeff Grimes apparently, they show clips to the offense, and in these meetings, they want to illustrate, here's what we like and here's what we don't like. And a sheep is someone who is, passive or timid, not aggressive, not physical. So let's say the wide receiver is not physical enough on his block, and it's not just up to the wide receivers. They're going to show that. And a sheep clip is terrible. A sheep dog clip is great because a sheepdog is somebody who leads and sets an example. So if you're going 100 miles an hour and you're being super physical and you're blocking down the field 20 yards for someone to spring them, those are sheep dog clips. And then the other thing, apparently there's wolf clips, and wolf clips are also bad because it's like going over the line and being too aggressive and hurting your team. So I do think that is sort of an interesting window into how Jeff Grimes operates and thinks, but it is all about instilling that mindset of physicality to then get on the field and just dominate.
So the physicality aspect of it, what about the misdirection aspect of what they're going to be able to do?
I think that is so critical. And so there were a couple guys who gave really good examples about how this can work. But Jake Renfro said there was a sequence earlier in the spring where they were just kind of hammering the defense with these wide zone runs. And then they set it all up. So the defense goes to fill all the spots. And then all of a sudden, a tight end hits a crack block. They have a reverse to a wide receiver. And Jake says he looks up and this dude is running down the sideline free for a touchdown and no one's within 20 yards. And it's because you spent that entire sequence setting up this play for later. I also talked to Austin Brown, the safety for this story. And he mentioned there was a situation early in the practice. And this goes to how it tests the eyes of the defense because there is so much eye candy. They ran a play and Austin had to make a snap decision. And so he decided, I'm going to set the edge here on what appears to be a running play. And that allowed the tight end that he was supposed to be defending to leak out, and he caught a touchdown pass in a high red zone situation. And so those are the types of small things that add up to huge plays because you're just kind of baiting the defense and you're consistently making them think. And Joe Brunner was saying he was talking to Ben Barton about this, a six-year defensive lineman, about how the D-line has to consistently shift and move and think. And as AJ Blazek said, if you're telling me you're going to make these guys think for even 1 millisecond or 1 second, and we're going to have a chance to get them on their heels, let's go. And so it's not always going to work, and certainly not always going to work against the Alabamas and Ohio States of the world. But again, it goes back to what puts this group in position to be most successful. And it appears that this is the way to go.
I guess we'll find out. We don't know, right? There's no reason to be pessimistic at this point. So we're not going to do that. It is not totally different than what Wisconsin's offense looked like before, right? There's a lot more to it. I think there's more to the passing game than perhaps there was before, but that this fits Wisconsin more. Certainly with especially the types of players that they can normally get here. Now, I say that after them getting Jayden Petit as the third highest, rated wide receiver in the recruiting rankings era that they've gotten. But more often than not, you want to be physical when you have the big guys that they have, and certainly that is going to play a role here. Does Dylan Jones feel comfortable in this type of scheme, do you think?
I think so. He is extremely physical. And look, he's grown a lot since last year when he was in a spot where he barely played. We did see that glimpse with the big run against Purdue. But if he's not the starter, it's a 1-2 situation with him and Darian Dupree. And they certainly complement each other, I think, really well. But yeah, he wants to hit a dude in the face, run through a guy's face, to paraphrase a former running back on this PG rated show. But yeah, I think he feels a lot more comfortable, and he likes that the decision making is in his hands, because he was talking about how you're reading the center's block. And so if Jake Renfro is going to go over here, I'm going to go here. If they stalemate each other, I know where to go. So yeah, I mean, and I think he showed it pretty well during spring ball, because he got more opportunities after Darian Dupree got hurt. So, going into spring, I said this before, I thought it was going to be a runaway that Darian was the number one guy. And that's certainly not the case as we get ready for fall camp.
Yeah, it didn't happen. And the injury certainly played a role in that. And we'll see what it looks like when they get to fall. We're not that far away from it. Another guy who just came in, as we transition here into some of the stuff that we learned after or during, I guess, Squat Fest, when we got a chance to talk to Brady Collins, and a guy that really jumped out during the spring showcase. His name's Nick Clayton. He's the outside linebacker, the true freshman out of Florida. Came in and had 3 sacks in that showcase, and he keeps on showing up in different ways. We saw him a bunch in practice, but physically he is starting to show up as well. Brady Collins said that he came in at 199. He was 234 the day before Squat Fest, so 35 pounds, and took his 40-yard dash, because they did combine testing the day before Squat Fest. He came in, was running like 4.62 when he first showed up. Now he's sub 4.6. Is there any chance that he doesn't play this year?
No, I think he's going to play. So I actually talked to Nick here this offseason, and his expectation is, first of all, contribute on special teams in whatever capacity that is, but be a potential third down specialist, where you bring him in as a different body type because he's got the physicality, but to have that type of speed and strength as a freshman can be special. Look, I'll be interested to see, well, is he going to end up ahead of some of these other guys that they got? They brought in a Tyrese Fearbry. They still have Sebastian Cheeks. How many guys can you actually play? But it's very clear they feel good about what they have there. And if you're going down the list of the true freshmen who got an opportunity to play right away, certainly put Eugene Hilton Jr. in there, but Clayton has to be high on that list as well. And this is why you enroll early if you can pull it off, because the gains you can make in 6 months are just not replicable if you come this summer. You are at a distinct disadvantage if you just show up in June. So he's put himself in an excellent position. And you want to talk about recruiting wins, this was another big time win for Wisconsin, because I think a lot of people believed he was going to go to Florida State. And he told me, like, they went there and him and his mom just felt like, to the education side, they felt like it was a much better situation for him at Wisconsin. So to pull a kid out of Florida of that talent level and then to have him make the gains he's made in 6 months, Wisconsin feels very good about him.
Yeah, and Brady Collins talked about some of the things that I was just making different, because he's a true outside linebacker, right? He is a quick twitch guy, and he didn't compare him to Nick Herbig, but he said he's kind of like that in the quick twitch nature of it, right? And he's a true outside linebacker of what we think of Wisconsin outside linebackers as, right? It's changed a little bit, but he's an edge rusher. That's what he is. And I think he's going to get his opportunities in certain situations, and maybe if he takes advantage of them, those opportunities will increase. But that's what he loves about him. And also there's some season, like he goes, genetically he's a freak, right? Like genetically he's amazing. I can't wait to see once he gets some more seasoning to him. And he's got to go through that. You can only do so much in a weight room. You can only do so much on the turf inside the McLean Center and workouts and all that good stuff. You have to then go put it on the field. But early returns on that, at least during spring, were very, very good. So we'll see. But you're right. They have a lot of different guys out there that could potentially be in that same role. We saw it. You mentioned Fearby. He almost played solely when it was third down and pass rushing situations. So when they put that package in there, that's who was out there. So that was one thing that stood out. Then another one for a true freshman that came in was Eugene Hilton Jr., a guy who certainly showed up in the spring and made a bunch of plays, but speed-wise, Brady Collins said that he showed up. He was running the 4.7s. I think he said 4.78, something like that. And when they did their combine testing, he was in 4.6 range. And he said, I'm not training 40-yard dash runners. I'm training football players. But it shows that once you get in a program, once you get in the weight room and all the stuff that they do, the gains that can be made in a very short amount of time.
He is the freshman that impressed me the most during the spring, consistently made plays, even in the spring showcase. Yes, it's not always with the ones, though he did get some, and he got some reps with the top two groups during spring, a lot of them. Both catches he made went for first downs, but start with the pedigree. His dad, T.Y. Hilton, played in the NFL, was an outstanding wide receiver. And then everybody who's spoken about Eugene since he got here says the way that he's handled his business from day one has impressed them, because it's very easy when you come in and you're the best player on your team, best player in your state, 4-star guy, could have gone anywhere. You've got this pedigree to feel entitled when you arrive. And he just put his head down and he worked, and it consistently showed up on the field. And when you had people leave the program or get hurt, like a Mark Hamper, all of a sudden, Eugene's getting more reps. And I just felt like if you threw the ball in his general direction, more often than not, he was going to come down with the catch. So that's how you instill confidence among your teammates and with the coaching staff. And look, much like with the Clayton situation, there are a lot of bodies there. So I don't know how many reps are going to be available if you start with, you've got Vinny Anthony, Jayden Ballard, presumably your top two outside guys. You know you have Trech Kahuna. Tyrell Henry showed a lot. Those are both guys out of the slot. Chris Brooks Jr. is probably going to get some opportunities. And when you've got an offense that's predicated on running the ball, we see this year in and year out at Wisconsin, other than perhaps the previous two with Phil Longo. How many opportunities are there really going to be for your fifth wide receiver or your sixth wide receiver? But he has that ability in him, I think, to be an immediate contributor. And I just love what we've seen of him so far. And there's obviously a lot more to come.
The other guy we got to see, true freshman, somewhat a lot, was Carter Smith, quarterback. And you asked Vinny Anthony about what he liked about him and some of the gains that he's made. What did he have to say about him?
He talked about the confidence that has blossomed here over the last 6 months. We saw how big of a deal that win was in recruiting and some of what he was able to do at the high school level. Even when he came in spring practice, you could just see, you get him out in the open on the run, that's where he thrives. He's got great athleticism and arm strength. But you show up at this program and you're throwing with wide receivers who've been in college 3-4 years, you're a little nervous. And Vinny talked about, he has seen that confidence grow in these throwing sessions because they do that a lot. Carter is so much stronger than where he was. He's gained 20 plus pounds. He's putting up big numbers. And this is why, again, you enroll early. I think it's very clear. If you want to focus on this season, but if you're looking toward the future, what happens with Wisconsin at quarterback after Billy Edwards Jr.? Well, you have Danny O'Neal and you have Carter Smith. And you don't bring in a guy like Carter Smith unless you believe he can potentially be the future for this program. So he's made a lot of gains. I think back to when Kenny Guyton was talking about the first time he went under center and he was super low to the ground. And like, you have a lot of things to work on, because when you're in high school, you're just operating out of shotgun spread offenses. It was the same thing with Graham Mertz. I actually talked to Carter this offseason, have stories coming on basically all these freshmen that we're talking about. But I think he said he ran in like 8th grade. I don't know if it was a triple option offense, but that was why he was so low to the ground. But he's made a lot of strides here in 6 months. And with all three of these guys, there's a lot to be excited about.
So that combine testing, we didn't get all the numbers, but Brady did give out a few, including the guys that tied for the best 40, and that was Austin Brown and Cade Yacamelli, two guys who also really, really impressed in the weight room as well. Like some of the weight that both those guys were able to put up. Yacamelli is, I don't want to be over the top here. The dude's a specimen, right? Like if you built a college football player, that's what it would look like. And Austin Brown, very similar on the defensive side. But Cade Yacamelli ran 4.4. He also put up a ton of weight on the squat. And we know what he was when he got opportunities last year. 8.3 yards per carry, had that long touchdown run against, in the spring showcase. Like, he's a freak. And I know that we don't talk about the freak list because it happens at a publication that we don't really talk about anymore. But
it's the Lord Voldemort of sports journalism, as far as I'm concerned. That shall not be named.
Yes, but that dude deserves to be on that list, right? Like he's insane, and Austin Brown as well. Both those guys off the charts. Vinny Anthony ran the 4.4s. Jayden Ballard ran on the 4.4s. Dylan Jones was 4.5, and then a number of other safeties that were in the 4.5, and a ton of other really good numbers. Brady just couldn't think of them off the top of his head, as we kind of caught him right after the morning, right after the offensive session. He was getting ready to go put the defense through the same thing. But those numbers, and Vinny Anthony said he was happy about it because if I actually trained for it, I know it'd be lower than that. Like I think he'll run in the 4.3s when getting ready for the draft next year. And we know how fast Jayden Ballard is too. But what I thought was interesting in talking to Vinny Anthony, he said you're going to see that speed this year. And again, I caution, because we've talked about this all offseason. We're going to have to see it before we believe it. I feel like we did the same thing a little bit last year. But he said you're going to see that speed with some of the deep passing game. We saw it a little bit in the spring, but I think potentially we see it even more in fall camp and into the season. That's what they need. When you're going to run the ball the way that they can, you should be able to throw down the field as well.
For starters, it is preposterous to me that the two fastest guys on the team are Austin Brown and Cade Yacamelli, because I would have said Vinny Anthony, Jayden Ballard, that's pretty much who everybody said were some of the fastest guys, but it speaks to how athletically gifted and how hard those two work. And I go back to when I did work out with the team, I was in this lifting group with Austin Brown and we're doing deadlifts, and I did like 225 and feeling great. Austin did 605 pounds of deadlifts. And I've never seen that many 45-pound plates on a bar. And then he goes and runs a 4.4. The Cade Yacamelli one, while it is surprising, it's also not surprising. And so we do these weekly videos in Badger Connect called Badger Bites. And I sat down with Dylan Jones. And one of the things we talked about was Cade Yacamelli, because I said, who is the strongest guy on the team? And most people did say Dylan Johnson, who we haven't really talked a ton about, but obviously with his wrestling background, incredibly strong. And he said, and Cade Yacamelli. And I was like, well, what specifically stood out? And he's like, man, I was repping like 285-pound bench press 5 times, and this dude comes over and does 337 times, and he just couldn't believe it. But there is that physically gifted nature of those two guys. And so I just can't believe 4.4. That is absurd. But you go back to the wide receivers. Well, 3 of your fastest guys on the team are presumably your 3 starters, because you have Vinny, you have Jayden, and then you have got Kahuna when he's fully healthy. Now you've got to get into open space to demonstrate that speed, but if they can get the ball in their hands, and this goes to why you're also trying to get the ball in these guys' hands behind the line of scrimmage, you get them off and running, you get them into space, they're hard to contain.
Yeah. Again, it's a very exciting, but also let's wait for it to happen, right? You can be positive about it, but also wait for it to happen as well. A couple other things off our conversations with the guys. We also got to talk to Riley Mahlman as well. And I asked him, because obviously the left tackle spot is one that opened up when Kevin Haywood tore his ACL and is out for the year. They went and brought in Davis Heinzen, and I know that you asked Riley about him, but more so I asked him because there's a lot of people like, what about moving Riley Mahlman to left tackle? And left tackle is a little bit of a harder job than you would think right tackle is. And he said that they did talk about it, that him and Coach Blazek talked about it, and they decided just to leave him at right tackle. But he said he told Blazek, I only need 1 or 2 days of practice to make the move over the left side. But it is a complete switch. everything is the opposite on the other side. So that is at least notable. That it was a conversation. But Davis Heinzen, what has stood out so far for him?
Well, first, you have to explore all options when you're in that type of situation, but it's where is Riley going to be best positioned to succeed? And I would have thought, well, okay, if you flip him over, then who do you feel confident in putting at right tackle? Because you've got a bunch of young guys behind him. But the Heinzen one, Riley talked about how he's come in and he's got this level of maturity. And yes, because Riley is a multi-year starter, he's able to talk with him. But this is why you got him. 35 plus starts at Central Michigan, so he can plug and play in that 1 year that he has. And I've talked to Davis this offseason too. He's coming in with the expectation that he's going to be the starter. And you need to make this move, I suppose, for bodies, but you don't make this move unless you feel like you can get a guy for a year and he can come in and start, and you don't necessarily believe that what you have is ready. They put Leighton Nelson out there. Obviously, they discussed, do you move Joe Brunner out there? And I have no doubt Joe could do it. But then you've got to fill that left guard spot. So he's got to go earn the job, Davis does. But I fully expect that he's going to end up being your day one starter unless somebody comes and takes it or he's just not ready.
What stood out in your conversation with him then? I mean, is was this a slam dunk, easy decision for him to come here?
Yeah, 100%. I think, man, it's been a while. These are many stories that are coming on Badger Connect, just trying to make sure the deck chairs are in order for when they run. But like, I think he was, look, he's from Wisconsin. Like, if you get this opportunity, why would you not come here? So,
well, I mean, there have been quite a few guys from Wisconsin not to come here.
Yeah, but if you're a portal guy at the mid-major level, I'm not necessarily talking about a 4-star guy where Ohio State's coming in and Penn State. It's a little bit different situation. They've been able to get a couple of these in-state guys who are at lower levels. So yeah, I think it really was a slam dunk as soon as Wisconsin showed interest. I want to say he showed up the next day, like when they expressed interest. Like he wasn't messing around. If Wisconsin's really this serious, I'm going.
Yeah. Well, we'll see how it plays out. It certainly feels like he is the guy there. And I guess we'll see when practice starts and how he matches up against some of these guys. He's played against Wisconsin. So, no, excuse me. He's Central Michigan, not Western Michigan. That's my bad. But he's played against some big time schools, and it's not like he's going to be complete. He's got a ton of experience with the starts that he's made, even at that level. So, as you said, you don't bring him in for no reason. You don't bring him in to sit on the bench for his final year. So,
especially in the spring transfer portal window, though, right, Zach? Like, well,
yeah, they had to make that move, but they had to make the move, right? Like, even if he was a guy that, for depth, just someone that's experienced, that's played, you needed to make that move, and you would hope that he's the guy. Didn't bring him in not to be the guy, but if it was something that they had to do. They had to bring somebody in for there because they just did not have. I don't think they had somebody they're comfortable with throwing in there right now.
Right. Worst case scenario, he's in
other than Joe Brunner.
Yeah. Yes, but again, then you've got to figure out your guard situation, which maybe wouldn't have been that difficult if you have a Kerry Kadinko and an Emerson Mandel and a JP Benchwall. But you'd like to keep guys where their strongest play is, and Brunner obviously is at guard, but you can go down the list of the other two that they brought in too. The Lance Mason at tight end, you absolutely have to have it because Tanner Koziel, like Mark Hamper, is out after a couple of months. And at wide receiver, you had some people leave the program, so you brought in a DeKel Crowdis from Kentucky, and you're bringing these guys in to be instant impact players. You hope that is the best case scenario, but worst case scenario, they're still a part of the rotation, presumably. So that's why you go and do this, and that's why I think the spring transfer portal window is a good thing for a program.
So you're of the opinion that there should not be a December transfer portal window; it should just be in the spring?
I like having two, to be honest, but I don't have to coach and deal with roster management. But what happens if your starter tears an ACL, or what happens if two guys? I guess they would have stuck around because they wouldn't have had an alternative. But if they don't want to be here, get them out of here and bring people who do want to be here. So, I mean, look, I don't think it's the worst thing in the world to have a 10-day window where you can assess your roster. I get in the pros, you just have one window, but it's also different in college.
It is. But also, what is the transfer portal? Does it exist?
No.
Is it something that is real?
No, boy. I don't know.
Not.
I feel like I need Keanu Reeves to answer this existential question for us.
Does the transfer portal exist? Is it something? Yeah. we'll see how that plays out. I know that the coaches want it down to 1, and I think that'll probably end up going down to 1. It just is a matter of whether it's going to be in December or it's going to be in the spring. It's a tough question. I understand. It depends. Did your left tackle get hurt in spring ball? Then you probably want it to be in the spring, right? Like, but I also know coaches want to know their teams, and they don't really know their teams because of the 2 different windows and that good stuff. I think 2 windows is best for the players if we're being, I mean, if that's what this is about, but we'll see. College football, the business of college football, not a fan of it. Not a fan of it at all. Can we just get to the end point? Can we just get to the end of everything, whether it's transfer portal or NIL or rev share or whatever it is? Just get me to the final point. Fast forward to the final point of this, however it's going to end up, whether they're employees and collective bargaining, which again, I think I would actually be a fan of, because it would certainly limit some of the movement, you would think, which I think is probably the biggest issue for college athletics, is the movement and guys just picking up and leaving all the time. But I don't know that we need to dive into that here. However, before we go, I did want to say, because we did our show last week, and at the end of it, we were talking about EA Sports and the college football game, and we mentioned Nate White. And obviously got the news later that day that he had passed away. And I intended to go back and trying to kind of cut some of that out, just because it felt wrong after we had talked about it. But certainly thoughts are with him and his family and his friends. And it's been a tough one for Wisconsin. I mean, obviously, this isn't the first time something like this has happened, losing a guy who's a former teammate, but was such a big part of the program. And this is tough. And so I certainly felt bad about us talking about that way, but thoughts are with him and his family for sure.
Absolutely.
All right. We will be back maybe later this week, maybe next week. We'll see. Jesse, thank you very much.
Thanks, Zach.
All right, there he is, Jesse Temple from Badger Connect. You've been listening to The Camp.